Hello and welcome to week 1 of Controlling Your Temper. My name is Carol Richards and this is Kerry Ross, and we'll be guiding you through the Controlling Your Temper CBT course. This course has been adapted from our CBT Controlling Your Temper group, which we run in the south of Glasgow.
The aims of this course are to understand better why we get angry, to be able to make links between the way we think, behave and feel, to learn skills to control our anger, and to tolerate better the things that make most people angry.
The focus of each session will be as follows. In session 1, what is anger? In session 2, anger and the body. In session 3, anger and your thinking. In session 4, anger and behaviour. In session 5, learning to be assertive. And in session 6, problem solving and tying things up. In today's session, we aim to help you understand better why you get angry or lose your temper, and to be able to make links between the way you think, behave and feel. So let's take a look at what anger is. The reason we talk about anger being the forgotten emotion is because often people with stress-related problems like depression or anxiety are offered help. Whereas when people are angry, they can often present in ways that make it difficult for others to help. However, as you will hear throughout this course, anger, irritability and frustration are common problems associated with stress, anxiety and depression. Anger is a normal emotion. For example, if you have ever suffered a bereavement, you may have noticed that whilst getting over your loss, you go through a period of anger. This is recognised as part of the normal grief process. Everyone gets angry, and we will talk throughout this course about how that can be a good thing. We now want to tell you a bit about some of the reasons as to why anger may develop into a problem for some people. Here are some examples to help us do this. Let's look at Peter. He is a 44-year-old man who has noticed he's becoming angry when dealing with his son's teacher at school. At a recent parents' evening, he found himself becoming angry and shouting at the teacher when she commented on his son's reading skills. What helps us to understand Peter's anger is that when he was at school, he was often criticised by one of his teachers and made to read in front of the class. Peter has an automatic reaction based on an association with the past. Because we aren't always aware of the associations we make, our emotional responses can be unpredictable. Next, let's look at Nikki. Nikki's a 32-year-old woman with 2 young children. She often finds herself shouting at them and wants to be able to control her temper. What helps us to understand Nikki's anger is that when she was growing up, her parents often argued and shouted in front of her. Sometimes our behaviour is affected by those we observe around us, particularly the behaviour of parents and caregivers in childhood. Our next example is Simon, who is a 50-year-old warehouse manager who recently received a complaint by one of his staff. His boss has told him to do something about his anger problem. What helps us to understand Simon's anger is that in the past, when Simon's staff haven't been pulling their weight, he has shouted and threatened them to get results. This reflects a theory in psychology we call reinforcement. Behaviour can be reinforced by either a positive or negative factor. In this case, Simon continues to shout at his staff as he's trying to avoid the negative consequence of being reprimanded by his boss. We call this negative reinforcement. If it increases the likelihood of the team reaching their targets and Simon getting his bonus, we would call this positive reinforcement. So to recap, angry behaviour can be reinforced to avoid something negative or to increase the likelihood of something positive. And finally, Neil. Neil is a 36-year-old unemployed man, and the Job Centre have sent him on a job skills course. When he arrives late, the course leader makes a comment about his timekeeping. Neil blows up, shouts at him and storms off. What helps us to understand Neil's anger is that Neil lost his job 6 months ago and has been working really hard to find a new job. His wife is expecting a baby in 6 weeks' time. It's likely that Neil's behaviour can be understood in the context of stress. When we are stressed, our body responds by switching on our inbuilt fight or flight response. It's very important to recognise how fight or flight affects our body and minds. This often explains why people become angry, and we will look at this in more detail throughout the course. If you're unsure whether you have an anger problem, ask yourself the following questions. Do I often lose my temper? Has it caused problems at home or work? Am I getting wound up by little things? Has someone else told me to do something about it? Are people scared of me? One of the things you might want to do next is to recognise the difference between healthy and unhealthy anger. Here are some examples. So healthy anger can be having your say. If you feel passionate about something, for example, if someone has committed a wrongdoing, anger might motivate you to speak up. Seeking support. This can be feeling out of your depth and using your anger about the situation to ask for help. Saying no. Sometimes our anger can drive us to assert ourselves. And lastly, getting active. Again, our anger can fuel our motivation to change a situation, whereas unhealthy anger usually presents itself as brooding or huffing. Being aggressive to those around you, shouting or displaying threatening behaviour. Now we're going to look at what happens when we are angry. And in order to do this, we're going to use the ABC model. A stands for anger trigger. B stands for beliefs, behaviours and body. And C stands for consequences. Let's look at the ABCs in more detail. Anger triggers are the situations that set you off. These can be different for everyone. Some examples of common triggers are those which are personal to you. So arguments with your loved ones or family conflicts, being treated unfairly, for example, being ripped off by a tradesman, or someone being rude to you, so maybe bumping into you and then not apologising. People around you not pulling their weight, sleeping difficulties, losing someone close to you, people making unreasonable demands of you. And there are other wider triggers which may affect you directly or indirectly. So examples might be bad drivers or certain political decisions that are made, abuses of power, or indirect examples could be global issues such as famine or atrocities in other parts of the world, religious conflict. It could even be the weather. Now, you may wish to take a few minutes to think about what your own triggers are, and you can download our ABC sheets from the website to write these down.
Let's move on to B for body. There are some changes you might notice in your body when you're angry. Examples of these are increased breathing rate, blood pressure increases, tense muscles, sweating, pupils dilate, digestion slows down, dry mouth, an urge to go to the toilet, headaches, fidgeting, And these are all part of our inbuilt fight or flight response, which we'll talk about more in session 2. Next is beliefs and behaviours. This is what you feel, think and do when you're angry. For example, you may believe that someone has treated you unfairly at work, which leaves you feeling frustrated, and as a result, you behave by avoiding that person for the rest of the day and ignore them when they try and speak to you. The C is for consequences, which is what happens as a result of how you think, feel and behave when you're angry. If we consider our last example, the consequence of avoiding or not speaking to someone at work may be that your manager reprimands you for unprofessional conduct. Other consequences may be falling out with friends, family, colleagues, guilt, exhaustion, avoidance or even being avoided, people being frightened or scared of you, disciplinary action at work, low self-esteem, increased stress, or even the anger being reinforced. So let's sum up what we've covered in this session. We've hopefully provided you with a better understanding of why most of us get angry. We've looked at the ABC model, which has included the triggers for our anger and some of our responses. We have also considered the consequences which may arise from our beliefs and behaviours. Before you do move on to session 2 of this course, we would suggest that you look out for any triggers over the coming week. If you notice yourself becoming angry, write down any changes in your body, thinking and behaviour on your ABC handout. Ask yourself, what were the consequences of my anger, and write down how you would have preferred to deal with the situation. We will encourage you to write down your observations throughout the course, and this may support your progress. In our next session, we will focus on anger in the body. Thanks for taking the time to watch week 1 of Controlling Your Temper. We hope it's been helpful.